Okay.
Well, welcome back, and if you've just joined us, you're watching Politics Today, but tonight, unfortunately, we're looking at that unfortunate development now in Lagos, where a Dana airline actually came down with 153 persons on board. Let me just, this is something I just got. We understand Dana airline, that it's actually, it's an Indian-owned airline, and that Dana operates 5 McDonnell Douglas MD-83 aircrafts. I believe that's the aircraft that actually came down, and that all 5 planes were built between 20 and 21 years ago. We're still trying to get officials of Dana now to speak to us as to, the state of this aircraft when it took off from Abuja, and of course, people want to find out when it had its last routine maintenance, I should say. NCAA too should be able to give us that information as well. But for now, 153 people on board that plane that came down in Iju-Shaga area of Lagos State. We do not know if all 153 of them died because we do not have official confirmation as we speak. But it's really a sad day. It's really a sad day here in Nigeria, and for families who have lost loved ones. We were talking about the issue of rescue. That the time you intervene, response time is very, very critical. But you take a look. You saw those pictures we saw earlier. See how jammed the street, the street is, and we know how jammed the streets in that area could be. And it happened on a Sunday when you would have a lot of people at home, so people didn't go to work at all. All of that will just add up to complicate rescue effort.
Indeed.
Don't you think so?
Indeed. Indeed.
But critically, it's a shame that we are still not getting things right when it comes to search and rescue. Yes. Rescue operation, because you take a look at those shots. Very few emergency.
I didn't see evidence of NEMA there. I'm not saying they were not there. I'm saying from the picture I saw the body that is statutorily, empowered or that has the duty under the law to intervene or respond to such emergencies. I didn't see them. It may be that there are some gaps. It may be that some things are not right. But I said, let's learn from this experience so that things can be done right. From the information I got, if that information is anything to go by, it took a while from the time this plane got to the ground before it started burning. If the response had been quick, maybe lives would have been saved. So I think it's a wake-up call on the authorities for us to do things right. Let NEMA, if the problem is equipment, giving them modern equipment, there's nothing like life. Life is precious. And whenever this kind of thing happens and we say no life could be saved because things were not done right, it's very sad. And sad indeed.
Mr. Mangwa, I want to believe you fly all the time. Tell me what effect this could have now, for people who fly all the time.
Well, there have been worse situations in our lifetime, and people still keep on, life goes on, as they say. We will keep flying, and we'll keep believing that God Almighty will see us to our destinations and back. But really, you cannot get away from learning from this incident and putting that learning in effect. Now, this is a clean-cut opportunity for us to decide to get serious with management of our airspace. And then again, with emergency response, we've never really taken emergency response like it should be. If Lagos were to have a tsunami now, it will be the same thing. If we're to have an earthquake tomorrow, it will be the same thing. Were we to have any kind of
As a matter of fact, I'm going to ask my director to show. Let's have some of those pictures we had earlier while we talk. If we can have those pictures now, let people see, so that we see what we're talking about. Yeah, you were talking about if we were going to have a tsunami now, we're going to have that kind of response.
The emergency response needs to be powered up. It needs to be geared up to come up to the 21st century. I think that the agencies have a clear opportunity now to show how far they have come from where they were, and to also highlight their deficiencies and use this as a growth opportunity.
All right, we're being joined now from our Abuja studio by Mr. Osita Okechukwu, who is a spokesperson of CNPP, that's the Conference of Political Parties now in Nigeria. Mr. Osita Okechukwu, thank you very much for joining us. We actually invited you here to come and discuss President Goodluck Jonathan's administration over the past 1 year, but we have a development, we have a situation on our hands. Give us your thoughts now on what has happened, what just happened in Lagos not quite long ago, the plane crash.
It's very tragic, devastating, and one extends its heartfelt condolences to the families of the casualties. It's very devastating, it's tragic. As you said, it is a sad day for Nigeria. For a lot of families, by this incident, have been dislocated. A lot of children will be out of school for what happened. A lot of families might not meet up anymore. But we pray to God to give them the solace and the fortitude to bear the loss.
What do you make of, emergency response now? I mean, the response time of emergency agencies now, the rescue operation, you see people getting involved, the whole area getting jammed, and gaining access, a very big issue.
The point of the matter is, if you go to the discussion we came for today, we need to do a lot more to meet up with our human element. We have a deficit in the welfare investment for the Nigerian people. We have breached the Constitution because the Chapter 2 of the Constitution says that the primary purpose of government is the welfare and security of the Nigerian people. And a lot had not been done in that direction. Rather, if we go by the president's speech, the president said we are embarking on reduction in the footprints of government in business. I don't know what Mr. President means by business. Because
Mr. Okechukwu, I still want you to talk about
the Nigerian citizens.
I get your point, but I want you to tie in what you're saying now to what the pictures we are watching now, the rescue operation, people getting involved, rescue officials not being able to gain access to that place, the response time very slow, because some people are saying, well, if rescue had come fast enough, quite a number of people might have been saved.
There is deficit in investment. If you listen to the fire officer in Lagos, he told you that the investment in the sector is very poor. And even in NEMA, how many of them have been trained? How many have actually trained thoroughly in the area of rescue in emergency of that nature in a suburb, in a highly density populated area? How many have been trained? And what are the equipment they will use in getting there in a second? They don't have such an equipment either. It's very easy to stay there and say that they could have been there. Where is their helicopter? Which they could have used. And I do not think even the presidential fleet that had helicopter will lend them one in such an emergency. Or any of the oil companies or the bankers or even the governors that have some light jets. None of them will borrow that to them. So, and they don't have any, to the best of my knowledge. So it becomes a collective failure on our own part, that in areas where we should invest for tomorrow, we do not invest in that. I do not see any day the recruitment in the fire service was published. And I didn't see the clamor of Nigerian youths trying to join the fire service. It turns out that they are not having the best in their ranks. But if they advertise for customs, you see over 1 million applying to join the customs service. So these are part of the deficit of the system that we must seriously look into in order to avert the loss of credible Nigerians, the loss of human lives, no matter who they are, especially those who are critical to the development of the country. I do not think that there is any of the 153 who is just a commoner, or even if he's a commoner, for God's sake, we are talking about life. So we need to invest in critical areas of our life. We don't need to wait for the private sector, as Mr. President said, that we are doing a reduction footprint in what they call business. And I don't think it's business.
All right, I get you, but he said something very important, because we have to round off now. Investment in safety, it's very crucial, and it would appear we're not doing enough, but because in actual fact, one would have expected to see, some light planes probably pouring water now from up, from the air, and you would expect, for instance, to see some heavy equipment being deployed now to this site to help in the rescue operation, but all of that is missing here. We're not seeing anything.
Yet when I said I couldn't see NEMA there. I wasn't looking. It's a bit ambiguous. I wasn't saying that NEMA people didn't want to come. What I was trying to say when I say I couldn't see NEMA, it's a system issue. It's a system issue, because I believe that if, let's use LASMA, for example. Like LASMA, hate LASMA. In Lagos State, they're everywhere, doing their work, whether for good or whether for bad. But you won't say you didn't see LASMA when there was a traffic issue in Lagos. So when I said I couldn't see NEMA, I was referring to the system failure, which I believe was responsible for their not being able to do what they should do. If we have invested sufficiently in emergency response, when Dr. Okechukwu, I think, from Abuja, was talking about fire service recruitment, I remembered 9/11, and I remember how the response, even though it was a disaster that nobody could avert after it happened, but even the lives of fire service, you could see where fire service response and rescue, you could see where it was something unique. It wasn't the kind of fire service we have in Nigeria, where you just see a tanker, you don't know whether there's water inside.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I give you the
thank you very much. Yes, government should reduce its footprint in business. Emergency response is not business, so government could increase their presence in these areas. We don't have time to discuss the politics behind the federation as it is today. However,
unfortunately,
we really need to look at the human element. Government needs to be felt by the people. There could be things coming up. However, this basic and the oil companies would have reacted were they to have been in their catchment area, really, because I've had experiences, and they have been the one people to respond to these emergencies, because they have the training, the safety training, somewhat quasi-pseudo in place in some places. We need to bring this in. We really do need. We don't need to have this again. Our government needs to come back and really reassure us that this has to be pretty much one of the final times we'll have to mourn fellow Nigerians in this way.
Well, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on the program. Mr. Charles Onko, thank you very much for your time. Mr. Emeka Chijoke, thank you very much. And Mr. Osita Okechukwu, unfortunately, I'm sorry, we've actually run out of time, and I'm sorry you didn't get enough time to comment on President Goodluck Jonathan's administration, but I'm going to give you your time next week. That's a promise. We're going to do this again next week. But thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you all. And it's on that note we end Politics Today tonight. We thank you very much for watching. Well, I have just been told, I have just been told by my director that we can actually continue. So, if we still have Mr. Osita Okechukwu there on the line, I've just been told. So, I've just been told we can actually continue. So let's continue this till 9:30. But let me come over to you here. What exactly, for instance, now? What exactly would you be expecting the Minister of Aviation? We understand the Minister of Aviation will be speaking very soon. What exactly would you be expecting her to say?
Well, I wouldn't expect the minister at this stage I wouldn't expect more than the minister can do at this stage, because I'm sure the situation.
But when the minister sees this the kind of rescue operation in place, this is pretty embarrassing.
Yes, it will be embarrassing. But like I said, I do not expect the minister to comment about the dire situation of the rescue operation there. The minister will, I will expect, condole with the nation, you know, though the victims, their relation, and then promise that the investigation will be carried out. That's the best I can expect.
Well, and let me just add this, that, you know, 153 people were on board that plane that came down in Lagos earlier in the day, Dana Airline, to be precise. And we do not have the casualty figure, but there are no indication as we speak that any of these 153 persons now survived the crash. There are no indication at all that any of the 153 persons survived the crash, but we still do not have any official confirmation yet, either from NEMA, NCAA, or from the Ministry of Aviation now as to the actual casualty figure. But please know this, there's no indication yet that any of these 153 persons now on board that plane survived the crash. This must be very heart-wrenching, Mr. Osita Okechukwu. This must be very heart-wrenching. No indication that any of the 153 persons survived that crash.
It's very painful by any dimension, by any ranking. There's no way you could look at it and you'll be happy today.
Indeed.
And tell me what this means now for our aviation industry.
Don't forget that for a long time, the Nigerian people had neglected the critical infrastructure. To the extent, as I said before, that the Constitution that we have on hand provided for what is called the fundamental objectives and the directive principles of state policy, where it stated clearly the primary purpose of government is the welfare and the security of the Nigerian people. And that the economy should be run in such a manner that the wealth of the nation is not concentrated in few hands. For the past 13 years, the wealth of the nation has been concentrated in few hands, and we are depending on the so-called private sector as the engine of growth. A private sector made up of captains of industry without even a factory. They are just captains of industry that chase the foreign exchange emanating from our oil revenue. As long as we go through that route, it's a formula that has failed. It's a formula that has made the Obasanjo regime to be a failure. And it seems President Jonathan is hanging on that formula. I've read the power roadmap.
And because you talked about President Goodluck Jonathan, let me just say this for the benefit of our viewers, that the presidency has already reacted. I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Osita, but because you talked about President Jonathan, I need to let our viewers know this, that the president has reacted. We have a reaction from State House. I'm just going to read that. It says, and this is a statement now from the President's Special Advisor on Media and Publicity, Dr. Reuben Abati, and it says President Goodluck Jonathan has declared a 3-day period of national mourning for all those who lost their lives in the Dana plane crash in Lagos today. He went on to say President Jonathan, who has cancelled all his public engagement scheduled for tomorrow, has also directed that the Nigerian flag be flown at half-mast for the 3 days of national mourning. Meanwhile, the president has ordered the fullest possible investigation into the crash. And in compliance with the president's directive, the Minister of Aviation, Princess Stella Odua, has already left Abuja. Of course, we told you that she's in Lagos, that she's overseeing the crash investigation and present an interim report to the federal government as quickly as possible. So that is what the Minister of Aviation is doing in Lagos. She's in Lagos. She's overseeing this whole development, and she's expected to brief the federal government, present an interim report to the federal government as quickly as possible. Now, the statement went on to say the president joins all Nigerians in mourning all those who lost their lives in the plane crash, which has sadly plunged the nation into further sorrow on a day when Nigerians were already in grief over the loss of many other innocent lives in the bombing in Bauchi State. President Jonathan assures air travelers in the country that every possible effort will be made to ensure that the right lessons are learned from the tragic loss of valuable lives in today's plane crash, and that further measures will be put in place to boost aviation safety in the country. He prays that God Almighty will grant the families of the victims of the plane crash the courage and fortitude to bear their irreparable loss. Something very important there in the president's speech. That's a statement now that the president says he hopes the country will learn, learn the right lessons from this, and to make sure this kind of thing never happens. I mean, the president saying that that lessons will be learned to make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen again. What do you make of the president's response, Mr. Konkwo?
He has the right thoughts. That's the right process. Is to immediately go after the learnings from it. It's to immediately document and to use whatever falls out of this as stepping stones for closure, for permanent closure, to make sure to mitigate these types of occurrence into the future. So yeah, Mr. President is thinking about it, and I'm sure the minister would have, should have, the correct people advising her. And look, if this is so critical that at this point in time, if it becomes a recurrent decimal, maybe we should think of farming the thing out. We should think of farming out regulation of our airspace and of our air industry, because we just really cannot afford to have this as a recurring decimal. It's just too much, too complicated, too heart-wrenching for us to go through as a continuum.
And the president giving air travelers this assurance, Emeka, the assurance that everything is being done to ensure, the aviation industry is safe, and that lessons have been learned and all of that. You think this assurance now will go a long way to convince people, flyers now to take to the air?
Yes, it's good coming from Mr. President. It's good, but I also say that even in the absence of Mr. President's consolation and assurance, life goes on. This is not the first time we are facing such a tragedy, and as before, we'll continue. We will not say because there may be disaster or there may be accident, not go about our usual. But
you fly all the time. Do you bother about the airworthiness of some of our aircrafts?
Yeah, I don't.
Do you bother at all?
Yes, sometimes
even though you're not an expert.
We do. I'm not an expert, but what we do, if you most times, because of, if you look at the general way of doing things in Nigeria, which most of the times is not inspiring. Whenever you board a plane like that, you pray to God. If you have faith, if you're a person of faith, you pray to God and then commit your journey, as it were, into the hands of God, and off it takes. When you land, you thank God. That's the way I've been carrying on, and I'll do the same thing tomorrow.
Mr. Okechukwu, do you bother about the airworthiness of our aircraft? I know you're not an expert, and I also want you to give us your reaction to what the statement now coming from the presidency.
Let me start by saying that President Jonathan is a very compassionate person. There's no doubt about that. He's a very humble person. He also comes from a humble background. But the point of the matter is that the shoe he's wearing is the shoe that had been tailored for the past 13 years, where the government and the party he belongs to are only interested in sharing the money on the table. They tell you that the private sector will stand on the private sector as the engine of growth. The government had no business in investing our money. By the time he came to power with late President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, they inherited over $20 billion. The $20 billion is today less than $3 billion. And they did not invest these $20 billion anywhere to build the critical infrastructure, either in the aviation sector, either in the power sector, either in modern rail line, or refineries. And I do not see, when in paragraph 20 of his statement, what he repeated was that we still continue with the reduction of the footprints of government in business. His statement is very consoling, but has that changed the formula that have failed? This same formula deprived the Obasanjo regime.
So would you want to see more investment, more government investment now in the aviation sector? Would you want to see more investment, government investment now in the aviation sector?
I believe sincerely that a very transparent government had to invest in critical infrastructure like aviation and trust on Nigerians to manage their affairs. I do not believe that Nigerian people are idiots or that Nigerian people are all thieves, that they cannot manage investment. I believe that if the leadership is transparent and invests in aviation, in power, in rail line, and other critical infrastructure, that the Nigerian people have enough good people who can administer such investments creditably and prudently. But for anybody to say that because we can't invest, we must farm out, if you keep on farming out, who had farmed out? The US, they are talking about the Hoover Dam was built by public funds. The Chong Bridge, the longest bridge on earth, 46.5 kilometers, was built in China by public funds. The tunnels we have in UK, the tunnels we have in Germany, the tunnels we have in France, the ones we have in the States, we all built with public funds. The Federal Highway Act of 1953 in the US was financed by public funds. And somebody keep on telling us this time that you must call the state, the local government, and put the whole money on the table. And when you share the money will be fleeced off, and that we cannot invest these funds because you are afraid that Nigerian people will steal it. At the end of the day, it's stolen. We've wasted over 2.7 trillion on fuel subsidy. 2 refineries could have closed that chapter for us and could have established a system where we benefit from over 20 derivatives of the crude oil.
Mr. Okechukwu, let me ask you this.
We have returned on stream.
I get your point, but let me ask you this. You know, because I asked you earlier if you would want to see some kind of government investment and more investment. Of course, you said that in the aviation sector. But something I want to ask you. You take a look at our aviation industry. In time past, we used to have several airlines operating in the industry, but today there are quite a few of them, and so we have a situation where you have this huge passenger traffic sometimes and very fewer airlines, and you also have a situation where you have an airline that uses probably one aircraft now to practically doing non-stop flying, fly to Abuja, back to Lagos, to Asaba, go to Benin, just one aircraft doing the rounds like that. That is not healthy, is it?
Have you asked yourself the electricity or the window that Jimo Ibrahim discovered to set up the Air Nigeria? So what we are saying is that the day we come back to our senses and invest on those areas and have our own standing points so that the other private airlines will compete to our national airline. It is not too late in the day to be done.
Oh, okay. It's
been done everywhere in the world.
Let me pause you there.
We cannot compare ourselves to the UK or to the US. We are still under a primitive economy. And if you are running a primitive economy, please think like a primitive economy. Don't think as if you are in the States.
All right. I get your point now. Let me come back to you here in Lagos. By the way, President Goodluck Jonathan has declared 3 days of national mourning for those who lost their lives in that plane crash. That's just the latest development coming from State House in Abuja. He said something that he would want to see the government come back. For instance, we should have Nigeria Airways fully funded by the federal government. And then I did point out something. You must have experienced that yourself. You fly all the time, where one aircraft now does the round like that. The aircraft goes to Abuja. That same aircraft flies from Abuja to Asaba, Asaba to Benin, Benin to Lagos. You know, one aircraft doing the rounds like that. I'm not an expert, but
yes,
it surely is not a healthy development.
It's not, because this has been happening for a while. And usually, if for frequent flyers in Nigeria, you discover that what I may call the two major local airlines, we normally delay you. Some of them delay you for about 2 hours. Sometimes,
and you have no choice.
Yes, you have no choice. You wait. By the time they take off, they just apologize for operational reasons. The delay was caused by operational reasons, and I've asked for a definition of these operational reasons. And what I gathered from all the answers is that these aircrafts are overworked. So by the time, like you said, by the time it was supposed to take off with passengers from Lagos, for example, maybe it was late in Abuja, trying to pick up people from Abuja, so it goes round. By the time it comes, it's 1 hour late. And sometimes this can be very dangerous for the operations of the, like I said, I'm not an expert, but I don't think I will at this stage call on federal government intervention in running an airline. You know, I think at this time, government has been found not to be a good business.
So government should just create, put the infrastructure.
That's what government does. That's it. I don't think government should run business. So that's where I disagree.
All right, let me bring you in here, Mr. Wankwo. What?
Yeah, I would agree here. Governments don't run refineries. They don't run airlines. We need to, like my friend in Abuja said.
At least we tried it in the past and we didn't get it right.
It's not 13 years. We have 50 years of drift. We have 50 years of drift. So, when we are comparing ourselves to these utopic ideals that went on in Germany and in America and how they quickly did it under these conditions, we have to remember, like my brother in Abuja said, we are in a primitive economy, if I might borrow his words.
Yeah, and we have to think primitive.
We have to think primitive. So we have to look for Nigerian-esque solutions to Nigerian-esque problems. And that's what I'm trying to say. And unfortunately, we don't have the time to really dwell on it here. However, there are ways that we can manage our airline safety. Safety first. When we survive, those of us that survive were able to create and craft the way forward for all of us, for our immediate families, and for the rest of the nation.
All right, I'm going to come back to you because our correspondent, Charles Eruka, who has been following this development and monitoring this whole process, is standing by to talk to us now. Charles Eruka, thank you very much. You were supposed to be covering the minister's briefing. Has the minister spoken? Well, we understand Charles we lost him along the line. That we're going to try to re-establish connection with him, but let me just allow you to continue with your thoughts there.
Well, no, it's just the fact, there still remains the fact that we need to find solutions that keenly address our peculiarities and our peculiar problems. I don't know. I'm not an expert like my brother here also says in certain areas, but you could see the face of consolidation in a place where you've had drift for over 50 years. I think the government of the day is more interested in trying to consolidate and so as to be able to create a viable roadmap to get to where we need to go to. So what it calls for is, if you give your man your vote, I think you've given it to him for 4 years, yeah. and we need to actually help out and make positive contributions that will actually enliven whatever programs that we voted for, because that was what we voted for, right from. Now, we talk about the subsidy being part of another way where money have gone down the pipeline. Well, somebody tried to take away subsidy early this year. It didn't work. It wasn't their fault that it didn't work. It was our collective contributions that said it was not the right time.
And would you say maybe it's time, for instance, the government subsidized the aviation sector to allow more players come in? And
I think, generally speaking, the country is at a point in time where it needs to, I say, courageously face up to certain social ills. Look at the last investigations to, for issues, panels that have been set up and address those deficiencies. What have come out? There have been previous aviation investigations. We need to know what they are, who was at fault, were there inspections. I was in a flight not quite 48 hours ago.
Oh, really?
And when we got on, as we were taking off, and the gentleman in that plane will remember as I speak right now if they're watching, because we had a sound from one of the wings going, you know. And the gentleman beside me said, "Hey, look, I want to know what this sound is." Now, we called the attendant, and they told us, "Oh, don't worry. It only happens when we're taking off or landing." Now,
and of course, you've flown several other airlines. You don't hear that.
And you know that you shouldn't hear that sound. So these things exist, and we should be able to pick up a phone when we luckily land and call somebody and say, "Hey, look," and somebody who will be able to ground that airplane until something is done about it. We don't have these things. I mean, yes, my brother is very right. In Abuja, we don't need any third parties to come in. But I put that out there so as to get us thinking that, but if it takes the loss of more Nigerian lives, I will swallow my pride and farm anything out and save the lives until we're able to actually handle it. And that we should really think about that.
Oh, this is something serious. Mr. Okechukwu, you want to react to some of the issues they have raised here?
What actually I'm saying, everybody should look backwards. I grew up in this country when the railways is one of the highest employing organizations in the country. I grew up when the Nigerian Airways was one of the highest employing organizations in the country. And today, what is ravaging the country is gross unemployment. And somebody is talking of unemployment, that he will solve the issue of unemployment without investing in some of these agencies. These are money spinning agencies. We cannot, because corruption, aid down such organizations. Because of the fact that corruption pulled down the Nigerian Railways.
Mr. Okechukwu, I'm sorry.
Because the corruption pulled down the Nigerian Airways.
Let me just interrupt.
Because of that, we cannot think of that again.
Let me interrupt you a bit.
Of such elements.
I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Okechukwu. Just hold on, and let's try to establish connection now with our correspondent, Charles Eruka, who is standing by now to give us an update on that plane crash. Charles, what is the latest development? Has the Minister of Aviation spoken yet?
Yes, she has. She has just addressed the media about a few minutes ago at the headquarters of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority in the boardroom. And she did say that at about 3:45 p.m. local time, the Dana Air Flight 0992 from Abuja to Lagos declared an emergency with the Lagos Control Tower when the plane was at about 11 nautical miles to the Murtala Mohammed International Airport. A minute later, the aircraft disappeared from the air traffic control radar, and then it was later discovered that the plane crashed into a residential area at Iju in Agege with 153 people on board. She also mentioned the fact that the National Emergency Management Agency rescue teams from the airport, Lagos and Ogun State, the police and other agencies got to the crash site within minutes, and that right now no survivors have been found, and that the federal government will ensure that the incident will be thoroughly investigated to determine the exact cause of the accident in order to prevent a similar occurrence in future.
Now, what else has she been saying? Because, for instance, people are wondering if as she said that rescue officials from Lagos, that's NEMA officials now from Lagos and Ogun, got to that place within minutes, and some of the pictures we have seen, you hardly would be able to identify these rescue officials on the scene. Then people are asking just how fast these rescue officials were in getting there, and it raises a lot of questions as to what the minister is saying.
Well, unfortunately, she couldn't provide that information. As said, later we'll be providing the visuals. She was practically in tears. But what she said was that this is the much they know, that she and other officials of the aviation authorities, this is the much they know at the moment. And as soon as they get more information, they'll it. But for now, what I've just told you is what she has said she knows about the incident. As for rescue officials getting there, well, it was a joint effort from the officials as well as the neighbors in that area. And if she said that they got there within minutes, then you also will realize that for an incident like that, there will be a lot of confusion and a lot of chaos. you might not be able to identify rescue officials who might have been scrambled there within minutes. So probably they might not have been wearing anything that would kind of identify them separately from
all right,
and people who were concerned.
Now, did she say the kind of emergency call the flight made? For instance, when I say the kind of emergency call now, did the pilot, for instance, did he make any complaint at all about some mechanical problem or any of that? Did she say anything along that line?
Well, it was just a blanket statement that the flight called the control tower and declared an emergency. She did not say beyond that they declared an emergency, which we could infer from that indeed there was a problem, whether mechanical or otherwise, but there definitely was a problem, and that's why they declared an emergency. Meaning that if they had been able to get to the airport eventually, it would have been an emergency landing they would have had to execute.
Have you by any chance at all come across families of some of those who were on board that flight?
Yes, Deji, we were at the airport before we got to the NCAA headquarters, and I'll describe the scene there as one of grief, confusion, tension, and of course a very somber mood at the airport. Even those who did not lose relations on that flight, well, were sharing in the grief of those who did. I tried to speak to a few of them, but they were not willing to talk at that time. A number of them were in tears, practically. Some of them were so angry that I remember one young man almost attacked the cameraman. But it was not very easy getting interviews with the family members and friends of the victims at the airport, because everybody was in a very, very sorrowful and angry mood. Those are the two adjectives to describe the feelings among the friends and families of the victims of the air crash.
All right, Charles Aruka, thank you very much for giving us update now on that plane crash. And let me just get a final word from you, because we have to round off in the next two minutes. Let me get your final word, Emeka.
Yeah, it's just like I said when you asked me earlier. I said I wasn't expecting much from the minister, and from what the reporter has just told us, it was exactly the things I expected the minister to say that the minister has said. I will end by saying it's a sad day, as already indicated, and all we will ask is let this be a lesson, that the lessons we've learned from this will translate into some positive measure to avert or be able to manage such events if they occur better. We hope that it won't happen again.
We pray it never happens again. Mr. Nwanko.
Yep, it's a sad day indeed. We will continue to pray for the deceased and for the families of the bereaved. I would urge for investigations. I will urge for...
And there will be one anyway.
There will be one. There will be documented learnings, but more so, I would urge for the implementation of the findings, because that has been a gray area in not just this particular instance, but in several other instances.
Mr. Okechukwu, can you just say a word to us in about, say, 30 seconds?
My word is that I still commiserate with the families of those affected, and I still think that the Nigerian government needs to have our own to be competed alongside with the private sector. If we do not have ours, we will remain blank and we'll go nowhere, and there will be a repeat performance.
And thank you very much for sticking to that 30 seconds. Thank you very much, Mr. Asida Okechukwu, spokesperson of CNPP, who joined us from Abuja. And gentlemen here in the studio in Lagos, thank you very much for your contributions.
Thank you very much for having me.
And sorry for keeping you beyond our usual time.
Oh, no.
It's just because of what has happened. We only pray for those who have lost loved ones in these plane crash, that God may grant them the fortitude to bear the loss. And for those who have died, well, may God rest their souls. We do not have any confirmation yet as to whether or not anyone survived. There's no indication at all that anyone survived. No indication that anyone survived the crash. And there were 153 persons on board the plane. May God rest the souls of those who died in this crash. Amen. Thank you very much for watching. We're back again next week. I am Deji Badimasi. Good night.